My name is Michelle, and I'm what most people would call successful. At 26, I work as an investment manager at one of the top firms in the city. I have a decent apartment, rented, but still, a good job, and enough savings to finally buy my own place soon. No mortgage, no loans, just the way I want it. Everything was going according to plan until that phone call from Aunt Sarah changed everything. "Michelle, honey, are you coming for Thanksgiving this year?" Her warm voice brought a smile to my face. Aunt Sarah had been more of a mother to me than my actual mother ever was. "Of course, I wouldn't miss it," I replied, already looking forward to her famous apple pie. What I didn't expect was who else would be there. I should probably explain why my aunt's call meant so much to me. You see, I haven't spoken to my parents or my older sister Jessica in 8 years. Not since that day I graduated high school. I had just received my acceptance letter to college with a partial scholarship for investment management. I was over the moon, it was everything I'd worked for. I rushed home to tell my parents, expecting them to be proud. Instead, I got the conversation that would tear our family apart. "We can't pay for your college, Michelle," Mom said, not even looking up from her magazine. "Your sister's getting married soon, and we need all our savings for her wedding." "But what about Grandma's money?" I remember my voice shaking. "She left it specifically for my education, you promised her." Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Things change, honey. Jessica's wedding is more important right now. You'll figure something out." That's when everything I'd been holding back for years came pouring out. More important? Just like everything else about Jessica has always been more important. The argument that followed was ugly. Years of feeling second best exploded into accusations and tears. I packed my bags that night and went to the only person who had ever treated me fairly, Aunt Sarah. She took me in without hesitation. What I didn't know then was that she had been saving money for her own son's education. But he had died in a car accident a few years before, and she offered that money to me. I only accepted on the condition that I would pay her back every penny once I graduated and got a job. Those college years were tough. I worked part-time at a cafe while maintaining my grades and scholarship. But I made it through, landed a job at a prestigious investment firm, and 2 years later, paid back every cent to Aunt Sarah. Life was good. I had my independence, my career was thriving, and I had carefully avoided any contact with my family. Until that Thanksgiving invitation. I almost dropped the pumpkin pie I was carrying when I walked into Aunt Sarah's house that Thanksgiving. There they were, my parents, my sister Jessica, and her 2 kids, ages 6 and 3, all sitting in the living room like they belonged there. 8 years of carefully avoiding them, gone in an instant. "Michelle," Aunt Sarah rushed to help me with the pie, her eyes apologetic. I didn't know they were coming, they just showed up. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart pounding. Mom looked older, with more gray in her hair than I remembered. Dad had gained weight. Jessica, well, she still looked like the golden child, even with 2 kids hanging off her arms. "I need some air," I managed to say, turning around and heading straight for the back porch. The November air was cold, but I barely felt it. My hands were shaking as I gripped the railing. "Michelle," Mom's voice behind me made me stiffen. "Can we talk?" 8 years of silence, and now you want to talk. I didn't turn around. "Why are you even here?" I heard her footsteps on the wooden boards as she came to stand beside me. "Because we were wrong. Your father and we've spent years feeling guilty about what we did. We want to make things right." "Then why didn't you call? Write, email, anything?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Because we were ashamed. So ashamed. We kept telling ourselves we'd reach out, but the more time passed, the harder it became. When we heard you'd be here for Thanksgiving, we knew it might be our only chance to see you face to face. To tell you how sorry we are. For everything." I stood there, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to list every single time they'd made me feel less important than Jessica. Another part Well, another part noticed how tired she looked, how her hands trembled as she spoke. I need time to think, I finally said. It's a lot. Of course, she nodded quickly, take all the time you need. We'll be here when you're ready. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I sat quietly in a corner of Aunt Sarah's living room, pushing turkey around my plate and avoiding eye contact. True to their word, my parents and Jessica didn't push. They chatted with other relatives, played with the kids, helped with dishes, all while shooting occasional guilty glances my way. I watched them when they weren't looking. Mom helping Aunt Sarah in the kitchen, Dad entertaining Jessica's kids, Jessica herself looking somehow both confident and uncertain. They were trying to give me space, but their presence filled every corner of the house. For 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I couldn't think about anything else. Every morning, I'd wake up and replay that conversation with Mom on Aunt Sarah's porch. Every night, I'd lie awake wondering if I was making the right decision by even considering forgiveness. I sat in my apartment one evening, staring at my phone. Mom's number was still saved there. I'd never deleted it, though I couldn't explain why. Maybe some part of me had always known this day would come. My finger hovered over the call button for what felt like hours. Finally, I took a deep breath and pressed it. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Michelle, Mom's voice was cautious, hopeful. Hi, Mom, my voice cracked a little. I've been thinking about what you said at Thanksgiving. I think I'd like to try, slowly. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. Maybe we could start over? That's how I found myself standing outside my childhood home a week later, clutching a bag of carefully chosen gifts. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful items I'd picked up, a scarf for Mom, a book Dad had mentioned wanting years ago, some educational toys for Jessica's kids. The house looked smaller than I remembered, and definitely more worn. The paint was peeling in places, and the garden that Mom used to tend so meticulously was overgrown. This wasn't the pristine suburban home I'd grown up in. Before I could ring the doorbell, the door flew open. Mom stood there, looking nervous but happy. You came. I came, I nodded, stepping inside. The interior was just as telling as the exterior. The furniture was the same from 8 years ago, but now showing obvious wear. The walls needed a fresh coat of paint, and the carpet was threadbare in places. Dad emerged from the kitchen, looking uncertain. Jessica was there too, her kids hiding behind her legs. I handed out the gifts, watching their faces as they opened them. Mom's eyes welled up when she saw the scarf, and Dad actually smiled at the book. Over dinner, Mom had made my favorite lasagna from childhood. The truth about their lives emerged. Jessica's marriage had ended badly 2 years ago, forcing her to move back home with the kids. Mom's health problems had reduced her to part-time work at the library, and Dad had been forced to take a lower-paying position after his company downsized. How about you, Michelle? Jessica asked carefully, pushing her food around her plate. How's work? Good, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. I'm at Morton and Associates now. It's a large investment firm downtown. The rest of the evening continued like that, careful conversations, avoided topics, and an underlying tension that nobody wanted to acknowledge. We were all trying so hard to be normal that it felt anything but. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Jessica started showing up at my office during lunch breaks, usually with 2 cups of coffee from the shop downstairs. We'd sit in the building's courtyard, catching up on 8 years of missed conversations. She told me about her failed marriage, how her ex-husband turned out to be terrible with money, and even worse with commitment. As Christmas approached, I found myself actually looking forward to family celebrations. But first, I had an important stop to make. A coffee maker? Aunt Sarah laughed as she unwrapped her gift. Are you trying to tell me something about my instant coffee? Maybe, I grinned, hugging her tight. Thank you for everything, Aunt Sarah. For being there when I needed you most. She held me at arm's length, studying my face. Are you happy, sweetie? With how things are going with your family? I think I am, I answered, surprising myself with how true it felt. It's different now. Better. Christmas at my parents' house was nothing like the tense dinner from my first visit. Mom had decorated every inch of the place, and Dad was actually singing carols as he helped in the kitchen. Jessica's kids, Emily and Jack, had finally warmed up to me, especially after seeing their presents, a science kit for Emily and a toy dinosaur collection for Jack. Aunt Michelle, they'd squeal, climbing all over me. Can you help us build the volcano? Watching them play with their new toys, I realized how much I'd missed having a family. Even Mom and Dad seemed more relaxed, laughing and joking like they used to when I was little. Months passed, and we fell into a comfortable rhythm. Sunday dinners became a regular thing. Jessica and I had our coffee dates. Then came the spring break trip. I hadn't planned it really, I just overheard Mom saying how the kids had never seen the ocean. Let's go, I said impulsively, next week. I'll book everything. That trip was magical. Watching Emily and Jack's faces when they first saw the ocean, hearing their squeals as they jumped over waves, building sandcastles with Dad like I used to as a kid, it was worth every penny. After the trip, things felt even more natural. Which is why I wasn't entirely surprised when Mom and Dad asked to talk to me one evening after dinner. The plumbing in the house, Dad started, looking uncomfortable. It's pretty bad. We've been putting off repairs, but... We hate to ask, Mom jumped in, but we could really use some help. I wrote them a check right there. It wasn't a small amount, but seeing their relief made it worth it. After that, there were other requests, nothing unreasonable. A new water heater when the old one died. Help with Jessica's kids' school supplies. Small things that family helps each other with. It was during a regular Sunday dinner when Mom dropped the bomb. She'd been quieter than usual throughout the meal, pushing her food around her plate instead of eating. Finally, as Dad was serving dessert, she spoke up. I lost my job, she said, her voice cracking. They're cutting positions at the library, and mine's one of them. I don't know what we're going to do. The medical bills, the house payments. I watched my mother's hands trembling as she held her coffee cup, saw the worry lines deepening on Dad's face. They looked old, suddenly. Vulnerable. Before I knew what I was saying, the words were out of my mouth. I can help, I heard myself say, I can afford $1,500 a month, it's not a problem. The relief on their faces was immediate and overwhelming. Mom started crying again, but this time from happiness. Dad got up and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. And so began our new normal. Every month, like clockwork, I transferred the money to their account. They never asked for more than we'd agreed upon, though occasionally they'd mention needing something specific, new winter boots for Jack, or a replacement for their ancient microwave. Jessica and I grew even closer during this time. When I had to travel for work, I started bringing her along whenever I could. Nothing too extravagant, a weekend in Chicago, 3 days in Boston, a quick trip to Miami. Just sisters making up for lost time. Life fell into a comfortable pattern. Sunday dinners, monthly transfers, occasional shopping trips with Mom, helping Jessica's kids with their homework. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like family should feel. Then came the call that would change everything. Michelle? Mrs. Peterson, my landlady, sounded apologetic. I need to talk to you about the apartment. My grandson is graduating from college in a few months, he'll be working in the city, and, well, I promised him the apartment. Oh, I said, looking around at the space I'd called home for so long. The wall I'd painted pale blue on a whim. The window seat where I loved to read on rainy days. I'm so sorry, she said, you've been a wonderful tenant. I'll give you plenty of time to find something else, of course. After hanging up, I sat in my favorite spot by the window, thinking. I'd been saving diligently all these years, even with helping my family. My investment portfolio was doing well. Maybe this wasn't a setback at all. Maybe it was the universe giving me a push. I spent the next few weeks meeting with Sarah, my realtor, viewing apartments during my lunch breaks and after work. I had a clear vision of what I wanted, something modern, close to the office, with enough space for a home office. I was particularly excited about a corner unit in a new building just 3 blocks from work. I could already picture myself here, drinking coffee on the balcony, hosting dinner parties in the open-concept kitchen. But I kept it all to myself, wanting to surprise my family with the news once everything was finalized. "Sorry, Mom, I can't make it to dinner this Sunday," I said during our weekly call. "We've got some problems at work." I was going through paint samples one evening when Aunt Sarah called. Her voice was tight, controlled. "Michelle, can you come over? We need to talk, it's important." I found her pacing in her kitchen, looking more agitated than I'd ever seen her. She barely waited for me to sit down before speaking. "I heard something today," she began, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. "Something you need to know. Linda and Karen were a book club." Linda and Karen, old family friends who'd known us since I was a kid. My aunt continued, each word seeming to pain her. "They were talking about running into your parents and Jessica at the grocery store last week. Apparently, after you started helping them financially, your family's been talking about you to a lot of people." "What do you mean, talking?" But something cold was already settling in my chest. "They've been calling you their personal ATM behind your back," she said bluntly. "Making jokes about how they finally found a use for your fancy job. Jessica's been telling people how she just has to mention wanting to go somewhere, and you'll pay for the whole trip." The room seemed to tilt sideways. That can't be right." "There's more," Aunt Sarah's voice was gentle now. "Your mother's been bragging about how she doesn't really need to find another job, because Michelle's good for the money. They'd been laughing about it, Michelle. Making fun of how eager you are to help them." I sat there, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Part of me wanted to deny it, to defend them. But I knew Aunt Sarah would never make this up. And suddenly, little things started clicking into place, the way they changed the subject whenever my job came up, how the requests for help had become more frequent, the calculating looks I sometimes caught them exchanging. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," Aunt Sarah reached for my hand. "I debated whether to tell you, but you deserved to know." I sat there for a long time, thinking about the past year. All those family dinners, the trips with Jessica, the monthly transfers, the grateful tears in Mom's eyes when I helped with bills. Had it all been an act? Then, slowly, an idea started forming. 2 days later, I stood outside my parents' house with 2 packed suitcases, having spent the morning moving all my furniture to Aunt Sarah's garage. I'd rehearsed this, planned every detail. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. Mom opened the door, surprise written all over her face. "Michelle? What are you doing here? What's with the suitcases?" Dad and Jessica appeared behind her, equally confused. "Perfect." I let my lower lip tremble, blinking rapidly as if holding back tears. "I got fired," I choked out. "There were budget cuts, and they found some mistakes in my work. They're making me pay back bonuses. I can't afford my apartment anymore. I was hoping, maybe I could stay here? Just for a few months until I get back on my feet." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before Mom's concerned expression transformed into something ugly and unfamiliar. "Does this mean you won't be sending us the monthly money anymore?" she demanded, all pretense of sympathy gone from her voice. I felt my heart crack a little, even though I'd been expecting this. "No, Mom, I won't have any extra money for a while." Jessica stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "What about our Europe trip next month? The one you promised to take me on?" My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to maintain the act. I simply shook my head, looking at the floor. That's when all hell broke loose. "You stupid, irresponsible girl," Mom's screech made me flinch. "How could you let this happen? What kind of investment manager gets fired?" Dad joined in, his face red with rage. "We should have known you'd screw this up. Just like you screwed up everything else." "You can't stay here," Jessica spat, grabbing my suitcases. "There's no room, and I'm not sharing my space with a failure." I watched in stunned silence as my sister dragged my luggage to the front porch and dumped them outside like trash. These were the same people who'd hugged me at Christmas, who'd cried grateful tears when I helped them, who'd claimed to be so sorry for the past. "We don't need you here without your money," Mom sneered. "You'll never get another decent job after being fired like this. We're not supporting a deadbeat." I stood there, taking it all in. The masks had finally fallen, revealing the ugly truth beneath. Every Sunday dinner, every family moment, every reconciliation, it had all been a calculated performance. Aunt Sarah had been right. Looking at them now, Mom's twisted expression, Dad's red face, Jessica's contemptuous sneer, I felt oddly calm. Something inside me that had been hanging by a thread finally snapped clean. Without a word, I turned and walked to my suitcases. Behind me, their voices rose in a chorus of insults. "Leech, ungrateful brat, don't come crawling back." I wheeled my suitcases down the driveway in silence, their shouts following me like angry wasps. The neighbors were peeking through their windows now, but I couldn't bring myself to care. 20 minutes later, I was back at Aunt Sarah's house. She took one look at my face and opened her arms. I fell into them, finally letting the tears come. "They showed their true colors, didn't they?" she whispered, stroking my hair. I managed a weak smile, then pulled out my phone. First, I opened my banking app and canceled the monthly transfer to Mom's account. Then I pulled up the travel website where I'd booked Jessica's dream European vacation. 2 clicks, and both the hotel reservation and flight tickets were canceled. The 2 weeks I spent at Aunt Sarah's felt like a cocoon, a safe space to process everything that had happened. During that time, my realtor called with exciting news. "Remember that corner unit you loved? The sellers accepted your offer." Everything moved quickly after that. Paperwork, inspections, final walkthrough, it all became a blur of signatures and meetings. Before I knew it, I was standing in my very own apartment, holding the keys in my trembling hands. Aunt Sarah helped me move everything in from her garage. We spent a weekend arranging furniture, hanging artwork, and making the space truly mine. She even insisted on helping me pick out new curtains for the floor-to-ceiling windows. That evening, after Aunt Sarah left, I did something impulsive. I took a photo of myself in my new living room, the city lights twinkling behind me through the massive windows. I posted it on social media with the caption, "Dreams do come true." Finally a homeowner, no mortgage, no loans, just years of hard work paying off. I knew what I was doing. I knew they'd see it. Part of me wanted them to. Sure enough, my phone rang less than 2 hours later. Mom's number flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "What is this photo about?" she demanded. "What apartment?" "I thought you were fired." I settled into my new armchair, feeling surprisingly calm. "Actually, Mom, I wasn't fired. I'm still employed, still successful, and now I'm a homeowner too. I just needed to test something." "Test something?" Her voice rose an octave. I could hear Dad and Jessica in the background. "Yes, I wanted to see if you actually cared about me, or just my money." I guess I got my answer when you threw my suitcases out on the porch and called me a leech. There was a moment of stunned silence, then chaos erupted on the other end of the line. Dad was cursing, Jessica was screeching something about deception, and Mom's voice turned sickeningly sweet. "Sweetheart, we were just shocked and worried about you. Of course we care about you. We can move past this little joke of yours. Everything can go back to normal." I actually laughed out loud. "Normal? You mean where I pay for everything while you mock me behind my back? But don't worry about a leech, you can pay your own bills." "Oh, and Jessica? I canceled your tickets to Europe. I think I'll go by myself instead. Goodbye." I hung up and immediately blocked their numbers. Then I blocked them on all social media. It felt like setting down a heavy weight I'd been carrying for too long. They tried calling from different numbers. They sent emails. They even showed up at my office building a few days later, but I'd already warned security. The sight of them being turned away by the guards should have hurt, but all I felt was relief. That weekend, Aunt Sarah came over for dinner in my new home. I'd cooked her favorite lasagna, and we sat on my balcony watching the sunset. "Are you okay?" she asked, refilling our wine glasses. "I have everything I need right here," I said, raising my glass. "A home of my own, a job I love, and the only family member who ever truly mattered." Aunt Sarah clinked her glass against mine, and we sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights come alive below us. Sometimes, I realized, the family you choose is better than the family you're born into. And sometimes, the hardest lessons lead to the most beautiful beginnings.